Hello, Internet. This is Sophia, and I'm an atheist. Hello, Internet. This is Sophia, and I am a Jew. A lot of people would tell me that I'm contradicting myself in those two statements, and some might even take offense at the combination of those two identities. However, even though I would not tell them that they don't have the right to be offended, because I simply find it to be dangerous territory to tell someone that they don't have the right, per se, to feel a certain way, I would say that they don't have a valid basis to feel offended, and that they certainly don't have any right to demand of me to cater to their offense at me identifying as both an atheist and as a Jew. If somebody is offended by something, you can't tell them not to feel that way, because even if the basis of their feelings isn't real, that doesn't mean that the feelings themselves aren't real. However, there still is that distinction between feelings of offense that are solidly grounded in reality and those that are not. If what offends you is that somebody identifies as Jewish for ethnic and/or cultural reasons, despite following a religion other than Judaism, or despite not following any religion at all, the facts just are not on your side. Of course, you can be offended if you want, but that does not give you any right to demand that they stop identifying as they do. You may feel very strongly that religion is the only valid source of Jewish identity, but there are simply too many facts that just don't fit that narrative. Genetic tests can show that someone has Jewish ancestry. Something that is just a religion doesn't behave in that way. There is no way that you can determine from genetic testing if someone has Christian ancestry or Muslim ancestry or ancestry of any religion per se, but there are cases where you can tell from genetic testing that somebody does have Jewish ancestry. That ethnic identities behave like that. Something that is just a religion does not. It is also an undeniable reality that there's many aspects of Jewish culture which are not part of Jewish religion and which are held by many people that aren't into the Jewish religion in any religious sense of the word. And though many of these aspects of Jewish culture might indeed be somehow connected to and related to the Jewish religion, they are in no way inseparable from it. Also, but still, even if you are talking about a Jewish religion per se, that might not be as specific as you think, because the truth is, there's a number of religions which have valid claim to being seen as traditional religions of the Jewish people. When you refer to a Jewish religion, i.e. Judaism, most likely you are referring to Rabbinic Judaism, which has its roots among the Pharisees of the 1st century CE, but which really congealed a little bit later after the Second Temple in Jerusalem was destroyed. It is by far the most common among the traditional Jewish religions. Since the late 19th century, it has diversified into a number of movements, most notably the Orthodox, the Conservative, and the Reform, which have their differences but which are all outgrowths of Rabbinic Judaism. Also, since Rabbinic Judaism has had the greatest cultural influence on Jewish culture as a whole, it also has the most influence on the Jewish movements whose primary reason for existing is cultural. But then there's also Karaite Judaism or Karaitism. And though there are some Karaite groups who do not identify themselves as Jewish and tend not to be sociologically treated as Jewish. There are Karaite groups that are indeed Jewish by both of those standards. And what's more, there is a genetic case to argue that Karaites as a whole are indeed descended from first century Jews, the same as rabbinic Jews are as a whole. So Karaitism also is one of the traditional religions of the Jewish people. And we haven't yet started to discuss polytheistic Judaism. A lot of people don't like to hear this. A lot of people like to insist that from the get-go, even though there may have been some renegade factions that practiced differently, that the official standard Judaism was monotheistic from the beginning. But there's a lot of evidence that that wasn't so, that for quite a long time in ancient Israel, pagan polytheistic religion was actually what was supposed to be going on, and that only later on did it switch to monotheism. Take, for instance, this biblical passage. And the Lord said unto Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a standard, and it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he seeth it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass, and set it upon the standard. And it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he looked unto the serpent of brass, he lived. Now, the official story from the book of Kings is that this brass serpent never was intended to be a representation of a polytheistic deity, and when people later on started to treat it as such, it had to be destroyed. However, that explanation, quite frankly, seems rather fishy and not very likely. It's far more likely that it, from the get-go, was meant as a representation of a polytheistic deity, most likely the Asclepius, who was the god of medicine in Phoenician religion and was later on adopted for the same role in Greek religion, and whose symbol, guess what, was a snake. I mean, look at the standard symbol of the medical profession today. That's Asclepius' staff. And so it probably was indeed meant from the get-go as a symbol of a polytheistic deity, probably Asclepius. It was built because at the time, polytheism was the official religion of the children of Israel. And when it was destroyed, it wasn't because people had suddenly started to treat it as a polytheistic symbol, but that rather more likely that suddenly polytheism was no longer okay, only they also wanted to rewrite history to make it sound like it had never been okay. But rewriting history doesn't change what actually happened. Now, it is true that today Jewish polytheism only exists as a reconstructed religion. I mean, let's face it, there's plenty of evidence that it used to be the norm of Jewish religion, but not much information today about exactly its details. However, we need to remember a few things about the people who follow that path. These are people who aren't quite ready to escape from the supernatural, evidence-free beliefs that are inherent to theism, but are to the point of being ready and needing to escape from the totalitarianism that is monotheism. But instead of and they could have gone to plenty of pagan religions that already exist, but instead of doing that, they try to find ways to to look for that within their Jewish heritage. And for this reason, I think it is definitely fair to consider this to be among the list of traditional Jewish religions and a form of Judaism. Now, while I'm listing different religions that have valid claim to being considered among the traditional religions of the Jewish people, there are people out there who will get on my case for excluding Christianity from that list. Because after all, Christianity did start among the Jewish people, and to this day, there are Christians who are of Jewish ethnicity, many who also identify culturally as Jewish. However, it is most likely that the early Christianity that it was indigenous to the Jewish people was radically different than what would be considered mainstream Christianity today. And the Christianity as we'd recognize today, the Christianity that was codified in the First Council of Nicaea, was probably something that didn't come into existence until after Christianity was taken over primarily by non-Jews. Now, while there are indeed some Christians who are of Jewish ethnicity and identify themselves also as being Jews, the only ones who try to pass off Christianity itself as being a form of Jewish religion are those affiliated with the Messianic movement for the most part. And this is a movement which is generally regarded as very offensive by Jews. And the reason is that primarily that the way they organize their ministry and their actions in general do not send the message that their Jewish self-identification is for the purpose of pride in their heritage or identifying as Jewish in order to celebrate part of who they are, but rather as a method of trying to coax Jews into converting to their religion, a religion which, no matter what they say, is one that is not indigenous to the Jewish people. Now, it is often claimed that the Messianic movement follows Jewish ritual. However, I'll tell you the truth. I once visited one of their synagogues, and from what I saw, it is far more accurate to call it an insulting caricature of Jewish ritual. At any rate, while some people in the Messianic movement are indeed ethnically Jewish, their religion itself is not a traditional Jewish religion, and it is not a form of Judaism, no matter what they say. Then there are those who identify culturally and ethnically as Jewish, but as Christian as far as their religion goes. However, people in this category make no claim of their religion being a form of Jewish religion, and oftentimes are just as offended by the Messianic movement as any other Jews are, and don't like being associated with it. And I think I should mention, by the way, that for a time I was in that category. Yes, eventually I got to the point in my life where I realized that God probably does not exist and became an atheist, but it was a long journey to get there, and for a time I had Christianity as my religion, though I still identified culturally and ethnically with my Jewish heritage, and I can tell you personally, I was every bit as offended by the Messianic movement then as I am now. Now, this might not cover necessarily every single person, but I would say that generally those who try to deny the existence of Jewish ethnicity or to deny the validity of any Jewish identity other than that which is defined by religion tend to fall into three groups. The first group is, of course, anti-Semitic people who want to deny the fact that their anti-Semitism constitutes racism, or if they happen to be other Middle Eastern people, that it constitutes some other form of ethnic bigotry. Another group of people who try to make the claim that there's no such thing as Jewish identity or independent of religion are religious Jews, often rabbinic Jews, who do that as part of an effort to impose their religious views on other Jews who just are not interested in their religion but still are very much interested in maintaining their Jewish identity for cultural and ethnic reasons. And frankly, it's difficult for me to imagine the kind of mental acrobatics that people would have to do to employ this kind of technique without knowing better than the lies which they claim, because it's quite obvious that if somebody doesn't have some other reason other than religion to wish very strongly to maintain their Jewish identity, holding their Jewish identity hostage wouldn't hold any sway on them, because why would they care about it? Telling somebody that they have to subscribe in any way to a particular religion if they are to have claim to the ethnicity which is part of their DNA, or to their culture which is also an inherent part of who they are, that is an inherent violation of their right to come to their own conclusions on the matter of religion. You have no right to put such an ultimatum on anybody. I do not care how committed you are to the traditional religion of their people. It does not excuse that. And if you tell somebody just because they don't subscribe to a particular religion that they are giving victory to Hitler, then there is a special place in hell for you. Well, that is, there would be if the afterlife actually existed. Saying such a thing, that's a horrible thing to say to somebody, not to mention that it has about as much historical basis as the claims that the Holocaust never happened in the first place. That's right, you heard me. If you tell somebody because they don't subscribe to a particular religion that they are giving Hitler victory, that makes you a Holocaust denier. Anyone who knows their history knows that Hitler's goal was to completely eradicate everyone of Jewish ethnicity, no matter what their religious beliefs, if any, were. But some people who deny the validity of any Jewish identity other than religious identity are not themselves trying to cover for the inherent racism or other ethnic bigotry of their anti-Semitism. They're not trying to push a religion on anybody, but they're passing on a notion that they hold because they have been fed that notion by those who do have these sinister motives. So they themselves don't have these sinister motives, but they're playing into the game of those who do. Now, truth be told, there are indeed some people who actively move to renounce their Jewish identity, or who otherwise try to shy away from their Jewish identity altogether. However, in those cases, you have to ask yourself, are they truly doing it of their free will, or are they simply caving in to pressure from those who are pushing the ridiculous narrative that there's no such thing as Jewish identity independent of religion? And even if the answer is that they really are doing it completely of their free will, that still only entitles them to renounce their own Jewish identity. It does not in any way entitle anybody to renounce the ethnic or cultural identity of somebody else. I probably should also note that no matter how much these people try to distance themselves from their Jewish identity, it generally doesn't do much to help them escape from ethnically based anti-Semitism, which is by far the most dominant kind of anti-Semitism. For example, during the World War II Holocaust, people like that would be targeted for extermination just like the rest of us. Now, I should note that the most invalidation of my Jewish identity that I experienced from within the Jewish community, particularly during my Christian days, did not come from Orthodox Jews, but from Reform Jews. And I know that not all Reform Jews are necessarily of this mentality, but those who were hurt me a lot. And it is for this reason that to this day, with my Christian days long behind me, I do not feel comfortable setting foot in a Reform synagogue. It is that is how hurtful it is when you invalidate somebody's ethnic and cultural identity because of their position on the matter of religion. So next time somebody tells you that they culturally and or ethnically identify as Jewish, but as far as religion goes, they're atheist or otherwise non-religious, or let's say even if they, as far as religion, follow a different religion, like if they're Wiccan or Buddhist, or even if they are Christian, or even if they are Muslim, because I'll tell you, there are in fact Muslim Jews, they do exist. But anyways, if somebody identifies as Jewish ethnically and culturally, but for any of these reasons does not identify with the Jewish religion, remember still, Judaism isn't their religion, but they are still ethnically and or culturally Jewish, and that's an important part of somebody's identity, and they have the right to do that. And telling them that they don't have the right to, if they follow a specific answer with regards to the religion question, that's a cruel thing to do, and you just should not do that to anybody. Thank you very much. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so, and to use the bell icon right next to the subscribe button to make sure that you receive notifications when I upload new videos in the future. And in this video, please remember to hit the thumbs up button if you liked it, and to use the share buttons to let your friends know about this video. Anyway, until next time, see ya!